Greg leaned back in his chair at the graduation brunch, his voice cutting across the room like a blade. After Amelia walks across that stage, I will file for divorce on Monday. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, and I felt every pair of eyes from the nearby table shift toward us. My face burned as if a spotlight had been turned on me, strangers whispering as if they had just been given a front-row seat to my humiliation. It was supposed to be a day to honor my daughter, but instead it had become a stage for my husband to tear me down. For a split second my chest tightened, the ground beneath me trembling with shock. I could see Greg's smirk, the satisfaction in his eyes as if he had won some twisted contest by delivering his verdict in public. He wanted to strip me of my dignity in front of my family, my friends, and even my daughter. Yet in that instant, something unexpected welled up inside me. Instead of tears, a laugh escaped my lips. Soft at first and then steady. It startled even me, a release not of hysteria, but of something far deeper. Greg's brow furrowed as the sound reached him. He had expected me to shatter, to fold under the weight of his performance. But I sat taller, my shoulders squared, my laughter spreading through the awkward silence like a crack of thunder. To the people watching, it must have looked surreal, a wife laughing at the very moment her marriage was being publicly executed. To me, it was the beginning of a different kind of battle. He thought this was the day I lost everything, but in truth, it was the day I chose not to be broken. It was not humiliation I carried. It was defiance, and it was freedom. When I look back on the years Greg and I spent together, I can still remember the early belief that we had built something strong. I was 41 and had spent most of my adult life as a senior accountant, living by discipline and numbers. My work had taught me that small choices compound over time, so I carried that lesson into our marriage. I was careful, saving where I could, clipping unnecessary expenses, and keeping a close eye on our financial future. It never felt glamorous, but it gave me peace. Greg had always been different. He liked the thrill of appearances and the confidence that came with showing off. At first, his charm made it easy to ignore the contrasts between us. He liked expensive dinners, while I preferred quiet evenings at home. He reached for status symbols while I focused on steady progress. Still, I thought our differences balanced each other. We bought a home together and carried a mortgage of about $250,000. We built a net worth of around $700,000 that included the house, 2 cars, and our retirement accounts. Together, we earned nearly $180,000 a year, enough to live comfortably without debt. I believed that was security, a foundation no storm could shake. Yet even in those steady years, there were cracks I did not want to see. Greg teased me for saving too much, for refusing to splurge on designer clothes or the latest gadget. He said I was holding us back when, in truth, those choices were what kept us safe. I mistook his complaints for harmless banter, not warnings of a deeper dissatisfaction. What I saw as stability, he saw as dull routine. What I viewed as careful planning, he viewed as weakness. And in the silence of those differences lay the illusion of a partnership that was far more fragile than I dared admit. The first hints of change came quietly, almost too subtle to question. Greg suddenly became devoted to the gym, spending hours lifting weights and running on treadmills. A membership that cost $120 a month became his new badge of honor. His evenings stretched later and later with the excuse of work projects, though he had never before shown that kind of drive. At first, I wanted to believe it was midlife restlessness, or a man finally caring about his health. But the new wardrobe that followed told me otherwise. In the span of 2 months, nearly $2,000 disappeared into tailored shirts, cologne, and shoes that looked nothing like his usual choices. He brushed off my questions with a laugh, saying every man deserves to look his best. That explanation might have been easier to accept if not for the hotel receipt I found while doing laundry. $350 were charged at a downtown Marriott on a Tuesday afternoon when he was supposed to be locked in meetings. My hands shook as I stared at the paper. It was not the number that cut me, but the realization that his stories no longer lined up with the life we were supposed to be living together. Shock coursed through me, heavy and cold, but beneath it something else stirred. It was the part of me that had always lived by facts and records, the accountant who could see a pattern before it was fully drawn. This was not random. It was a trail, and trails led somewhere. For the first time in years, I stopped looking at my husband with blind trust and began to see him as a man making choices outside our marriage. The hurt was sharp, but the clarity was sharper. I knew then that this was not only about betrayal of love, it was the beginning of a deeper deception, one that I would need to uncover step by step. It did not take long for Greg's words to cut deeper than his absences. He began twisting small conversations into accusations, making me feel like I was losing touch with reality. If I asked why he stayed late, he accused me of paranoia. If I questioned the new clothes, he said I was insecure. Each exchange felt like a blade pressed against my dignity, carving me into the unstable wife he wanted the world to believe I was. The most painful moments were not in private, but in public. At a school event, he deliberately sat away from me, and when friends asked if we were all right, he spoke loudly enough for the entire row to hear. He painted me as someone struggling with emotional problems, a woman who needed patience and pity. Faces turned toward me with sympathy laced with judgment. Even our daughter started to repeat his lines, whispering that maybe I needed rest or help. Hearing those words from her lips was like being erased from my own home. Yet in that darkness, something within me steadied. I realized that his cruelty had a pattern, one meant to push me off balance until I surrendered everything. Instead of breaking, I began writing it all down. Every cutting remark, every inconsistency, every moment he tried to twist reality, I recorded in a journal I kept hidden at my office. To him, I appeared fragile, slipping into silence, but inside, I was sharpening my focus. Those pages became more than paper. They were the proof that I was not unraveling. I was gathering the strength to fight back with the truth. I reached a point where I knew silence would no longer protect me. For weeks, I had endured Greg's accusations and his efforts to paint me as unstable. But the accountant in me refused to let his version of the truth stand. Numbers do not lie, and neither do records. I began documenting every detail, from receipts he left in his pockets to the nights he claimed to be working late. Each note became part of a file that grew heavier with every passing day. What looked like weakness on the outside was really preparation. Soon, I realized I needed more than a notebook. I hired a private investigator, paid from a savings account Greg had long forgotten. The reports that came back confirmed my worst fears. There was not just a woman. There were meetings with lawyers and financial advisors hidden behind the same hotel walls where he played out his double life. He had opened a secret account with $75,000 tucked away, funds he hoped I would never see. He was shifting stock options, planning to drain our 401k, and quietly plotting to leave me with scraps while he kept the lion's share. The discovery was painful, but it hardened me. For every move he made in the shadows, I made one of my own in the light of proof. I called Jessica, my college roommate, who had become a divorce attorney. She listened, and when I laid out the records I had kept, she told me something that steadied my spirit. His lies and hidden accounts were not just betrayal. They were evidence that would turn the tide in my favor. From that moment on, I no longer felt like a victim waiting for the next blow. I was building a case, one that would use his own schemes against him. Every dollar he tried to hide, Every receipt he thought was forgotten had become my weapon. The man who tried to manipulate me into silence had overlooked the one truth I had always lived by. Paper trails do not lie. They speak louder than charm, louder than threats, and in the end, they would speak for me. Greg had been rehearsing his scene for weeks, convinced he was about to deliver the final act of control. In his mind, the graduation brunch was the perfect setting. Family, friends, and strangers would all witness his bold announcement, and he believed that the shock would crush me into silence. He imagined himself as the man who held the power, the one who ended the marriage on his own terms, while I sat powerless beneath his performance. The smug smile on his face showed how much he relished the moment. He thought of it as a strategy. By choosing a public stage, he believed he could humiliate me beyond recovery, forcing me to accept whatever came next without resistance. He convinced himself that I would be too embarrassed to fight back, too consumed by shame to protect myself. The arrogance in his posture, the way he leaned forward with his voice raised just enough for nearby tables to hear, all of it was designed to wound. What he never realized was that arrogance blinds a man more than love ever does. Greg entered that day believing he had built a perfect trap. In truth, he had only walked into the one he created for himself. He mistook silence for weakness and calm for ignorance. Every detail he overlooked, every lie he thought buried, was waiting for this exact stage. While he reveled in the illusion of control, he had no idea that the script he wrote would soon be torn apart, not by chance, but by the very woman he thought he was about to destroy. My laugh echoed louder than I expected, cutting through the heavy silence of the brunch. Greg froze, his confident grin faltering as if someone had pulled the rug out from under him. I reached into my purse and pulled out a white envelope, laying it on the table with a calmness that burned hotter than anger ever could. The light above caught the edge of the paper, making it glow against the dark wood. For a moment, even the clinking of silverware stopped. Every eye was on us, waiting for me to crumble. But instead, they saw the opposite. I looked at Greg, still smiling faintly, and told him he was already too late. The divorce papers had been filed 3 days earlier, and by now, a process server should have delivered them to his office. The blood drained from his face, his mouth opening and closing without sound. He tried to form an excuse, a defense, anything to claw back the power he thought he held. But I kept going, my voice steady and sharp. I knew about the woman from his office, the secret account with $75,000, and the meetings at hotels that had nothing to do with business. I reminded him of what he always ignored. I am an accountant. Finding hidden money is not a mystery to me. It is what I do for a living. Every receipt he thought forgotten, every transfer he believed invisible, I had already traced. His tricks were not clever. They were evidence. And now, they belonged to me. The silence from the surrounding tables grew thick, a quiet audience to his unraveling. His hands trembled as he reached for the envelope, but he could not bring himself to open it. Greg hissed that I did not understand what I was up against, but the words rang hollow. I did understand. I had been preparing for this exact moment while he underestimated me. The man who wanted to blindside me at our daughter's graduation had instead been cornered by his own schemes. That envelope on the table was not just paper. It was justice folded neatly in white, proof that lies and arrogance cannot survive the weight of truth. For the first time in months, I felt no fear, only the release that comes when you watch someone's cruelty collapse under its own weight. Later that night, after the noise of the celebration had faded, Amelia sat beside me with her graduation photos spread across the table. She looked at me with wide eyes and asked why I had not fallen apart when her father announced the divorce. I took her hand and told her that when someone shows their true face, the only real response is relief. Pain is temporary, but clarity sets you free. Watching Greg finally expose himself was not devastating. It was freedom from years of pretending he was someone he never was. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw the confusion she had carried in silence. I told her she did not need to apologize for believing him, because manipulation is built on twisting love into doubt. What mattered was that we were here now, together, stronger for having seen the truth. The weight that had pressed on my chest for months had lifted, and in its place was calm. For the first time in a long time, the house felt like a home again. Meanwhile, Greg faced a different reality. The courts examined every account he tried to hide, every transfer he thought clever, and turned his schemes into proof of deceit. His arrogance became his undoing, and the very money he tried to steal secured Amelia's future. As I watched my daughter smile, I understood something deeper. Honor does not come from how others see us, or from the games people play to tear us down. It comes from holding to truth when it costs the most, from standing firm in dignity, even when the world tries to strip it away. There are moments in life when silence feels safer, but silence only feeds the ones who try to control us. Every time you choose truth over fear, you reclaim a part of your strength. That choice may look small, but it becomes the foundation of dignity that no one can take away. If you have lived through manipulation or public humiliation and still found a way to stand tall, your story matters. Share it, because someone else who is struggling in the dark may see themselves in your words and find the courage to rise. This community is built not on perfection, but on people who refuse to bow to lies. So add your voice in the comments, let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if you want more stories that honor resilience over betrayal. Each click is more than support for this channel. It is a reminder that truth spoken out loud can ripple through others, creating strength that grows beyond any one person.